The Victorian era, a period spanning the reign of Queen Victoria from 1837 to 1901, witnessed a complex and evolving relationship with death. During this period, the high mortality rate, particularly from diseases like tuberculosis and cholera, made death a frequent visitor in homes across all social strata. This constant presence of mortality fostered a culture deeply preoccupied with mourning rituals and expressions of grief. And for widows of the era, these customs carried a particularly heavy weight, both literally and figuratively. In the year immediately following a husband's death, a Victorian widow was expected to enter a strict period of full mourning. This societal mandate dictated not only her emotional response, but also, and perhaps more significantly, her outward appearance. Throughout the era, clothing became the primary language of grief, a symbolic vocabulary understood by all members of society. The fabrics chosen for mourning attire were deliberately heavy and cumbersome, reflecting the weight of the widow's sorrow. Thick, dull crepe was the material of choice, its texture both visually and tactilely representing the harsh reality of loss. Bombazine, a combination of silk and worsted wool, also featured prominently, adding to the somber and restrictive nature of the widow's garments. The color, of course, was universally black, its depth symbolizing the all-encompassing nature of grief. As events unfolded and the months of mourning passed, the intensity of the widow's attire was expected to gradually diminish. After a year and a day, she could transition into second mourning, also known as half mourning. During this period, some subtle variations were permissible. The stark black could be softened with the introduction of gray or mauve, suggesting the slow return of light and life into the widow's world. The heavy crepe might give way to slightly less restrictive fabrics, although ornamentation remained minimal. This gradual shift in dress served as a public signal of the widow's slow reintegration into society. Throughout the Victorian era, the length of mourning was carefully prescribed by societal norms and further dictated by the closeness of the relationship to the deceased. For a widow, the expected period of mourning was often extensive, sometimes lasting 2 years or even longer, particularly for older women. Subsequently, even after the formal period of mourning concluded, many widows chose to continue wearing subdued colors and simpler styles for the remainder of their lives, a perpetual outward symbol of their loss and a testament to the enduring bond with their departed husbands. The intricate details of mourning attire extended beyond fabric and color to encompass specific accessories. Jet jewelry, a black gemstone formed from fossilized wood, became a ubiquitous symbol of bereavement. Its somber sheen and light weight made it a practical and symbolic adornment for women already burdened by heavy garments and profound grief. Veils, often made of heavy crepe, were also essential, serving both to conceal the widow's grief-stricken face and to symbolize her seclusion from the world. Even the style of headdress was dictated by mourning etiquette, with specific bonnets and caps signifying the different stages of grief. These meticulous details underscore the pervasiveness of mourning customs in Victorian society and the profound impact they had on the lives of women who had lost their husbands. Beyond the sartorial demands, Victorian mourning customs dictated a wide range of social behaviors and expectations for widows. During this period, widows were expected to embody the very essence of grief, both publicly and privately. Excessive displays of emotion were not only permissible but often encouraged, reinforcing the image of the heartbroken widow consumed by sorrow. Conversely, any sign of resilience or too swift a return to normalcy could be met with social disapproval, viewed as a disrespect to the deceased. In the year following their husband's death, widows were expected to withdraw almost entirely from social life. Attending parties, balls, or other festive gatherings was strictly forbidden, reinforcing their status as social outcasts. Even simple pleasures like listening to music or engaging in lighthearted conversation were discouraged, seen as inappropriate distractions from their grief. Subsequently, as the months progressed, widows could gradually re-enter society, but their participation remained carefully circumscribed by mourning etiquette. Throughout the Victorian era, letter writing played a crucial role in communicating condolences and maintaining social connections during times of bereavement. For widows, these written expressions of sympathy provided a tangible link to the outside world and offered solace in their isolation. However, even the act of writing and receiving letters was governed by strict protocols. Special mourning stationery, edged in black, was de rigueur, and the content of the letters was expected to reflect the somber tone of the occasion. The financial realities of widowhood also played a significant role in shaping the experience of mourning. During this period, women often had limited control over their finances, relying entirely on their husbands for economic support. A husband's death could leave a widow in a precarious financial position, particularly if she had no sons or other male relatives to take on the role of provider. The elaborate and often expensive requirements of mourning attire added another layer of burden for women already struggling to make ends meet. Some widows were forced to resort to dyeing existing garments black or borrowing mourning clothes from relatives, underscoring the class disparities in how mourning customs were observed. As events unfolded and the 20th century approached, the rigid strictures of Victorian mourning began to loosen their hold. Changing social attitudes and the growing economic independence of women played a role in this shift. Subsequently, mourning practices became less ostentatious and more focused on personal expression of grief rather than strict adherence to social codes. However, the legacy of Victorian mourning customs, with its emphasis on ritual and symbolism, continues to offer valuable insights into the complex relationship between life and death in this fascinating era. The practice of mourning photography emerged as a unique and poignant aspect of Victorian bereavement culture. During this period, the relatively new technology of photography provided a tangible way to memorialize the deceased and document the rituals of grief. Post-mortem photography, while often perceived as macabre by modern sensibilities, served as a way for families to preserve a final image of their loved ones. These photographs, often taken with the deceased or in a lifelike setting, became cherished keepsakes, tangible reminders of those who had passed. For widows, photography offered another avenue for expressing their grief and adhering to societal expectations. Portraits of widows in their mourning attire became common, serving as visual testaments to their bereavement and their adherence to the strict codes of mourning etiquette. These images captured not only the outward manifestations of grief, the black clothing, the somber expression, but also hinted at the inner turmoil and emotional weight carried by these women. The photographs often included symbolic objects, such as wilting flowers or clasped hands, further emphasizing the themes of loss and remembrance. Throughout the era, the burgeoning spiritualist movement also influenced mourning practices. The belief in the possibility of communicating with the dead gained widespread popularity, offering comfort to those grappling with loss. Seances and other spiritualist practices became integrated into some mourning rituals, providing a sense of connection to the departed and fueling the hope of reunion in the afterlife. Subsequently, this fascination with the spirit world found its way into mourning photography, with some photographers attempting to capture images of ghostly apparitions or other supernatural phenomena. As events unfolded and the late Victorian period gave way to the Edwardian era, mourning practices began to evolve. The influence of Queen Victoria's extended period of mourning for Prince Albert, which had set the standard for elaborate bereavement rituals, gradually waned. Subsequently, a more practical and less ostentatious approach to mourning emerged, reflecting changing social attitudes and the increasing participation of women in public life. The elaborate crepe-laden dresses and restrictive social customs associated with full mourning began to give way to simpler, less cumbersome attire and a greater emphasis on personal expression of grief. The economic and social changes of the late 19th and early 20th centuries further contributed to this shift in mourning practices. During this period, increasing numbers of women entered the workforce, necessitating more practical clothing and a less rigid adherence to social conventions. The rise of new scientific discoveries and a growing emphasis on rationality also played a role in challenging the traditional beliefs and superstitions surrounding death and the afterlife. While the elaborate rituals of Victorian mourning gradually faded, the era's profound engagement with grief and its enduring impact on the lives of women continues to fascinate and offer valuable insights into the complexities of human experience.